Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Kaba number LR1041S 26D41. And this video will serve as a overview of this mechanical combination lock. We're going to do a visual tour of the item. We're going to go over the different functions, the different options that can be ordered with this lock, how it works. We're going to go over the installation instructions, templating, how to service the code combination, etc. So let's start with a visual tour of the item. This lock weighs about 11 pounds, at least it does in its box, so it's quite a heavy endeavor. Looks like we've got everything out. Let's take a look. So here's the business end of this lock. It is certainly handed. We are looking at a right-hand version. The stock code from Kaba Ilko is the numbers 2 and 4 together, and then the number 3. Every lock that ships is that code. Absolutely be sure to change it. Absolutely change it. Otherwise, anyone who's ever bought a Kaba Ilko lock will know your code. So change it immediately upon successful installation. So we've got the lock here. We're going to go over this function. This is a 1041, and that's going to mean a very specific set of features. This is the S version, which means it will take a Schlage interchangeable core cylinder. I happen to have the cylinder here, and let's place it in. Being interchangeable core and Schlage compatible, and we'll talk about the other cylinder manufacturers will work in here as well. You'll need a control key is what I'm driving at. I've got my Schlage 23030 that's going to go inside of here. Okay, so the core is installed. I go to the change key that operates it. That will, of course, allow me to operate the latch. Okay. That's it. Now we're installed. Big, heavy lock. Servicing it. You're probably never going to have to open this up, but there are times that you have to, and we're going to go over the servicing of this as well. So that's the business end. Obviously 5 codes that are here. Your interior lever, I removed that because it wasn't fully seated onto the interior stem of the lock. If I had seated it, it would simply be like that. It's not installed onto the unit because you've got during the process of installation, of course, your plates are going to have to go on the inside. It's going to look like that. You are going to get a pretty epic latch bolt. 2 3/4 is going to be the standard back set with a beveled edge. Okay, that may look like it's at 90 degrees. It's not. It's intended for a beveled edge. This is a floating edge. It will flatten out if you've got a square edge door like a typical non-handed hollow metal door. This is going to be 2 1/4 by 1 1/8, standard for a 161 prep. You're going to modify that 161 prep for the function holes necessary, and we're going to go over the template certainly as well. This will have a typical latch projection of 1/2 inch. Be mindful, fire-rated doors will sometimes require a 3/4 inch latch projection, and that data will be literally shown on the tag on the door itself. This is obviously a deadlocking feature. A proper installation, the deadlocking tab would be depressed, and then you cannot Lloyd is the term, Lloyd. If I were to try to Lloyd that, if it's not installed correctly, you can just push it all the way in. When it's properly installed and that tab is held back, you cannot depress it. The way that that's supposed to work via the strike plate is it's going to look not like this. That's incorrect. You see that all the time. People say, oh, my lock doesn't work reliably. trying to troubleshoot it, you eventually realize they've got the entire latch sticking in there, and pressure, and as you try to turn the lever back, it grinds that tab against the face of the strike lip, and it won't come back. That's what it's supposed to look like. That tab is properly held back. I can't Lloyd the latch. When it's improperly installed, I can Lloyd the latch. This is going to be a 4 7/8 strike. That is a typical ANSI cutout, American National Standards Institute, 4 7/8. It's going to have an overall width of about 1 13/16, 1.25 up here. The way that strikes are measured, though, is from the center line of the screw hole to the edge of the lip, and this is going to be about 1.25 inches. That's typical. Lots of generous room up in here. If your door were to be off a small amount, you know, if the distance between the edge of the door and frame, pardon me, if the height of the lock and the center line of the strike were a little bit off, this would certainly tolerate it. You're not really going to see that, but occasionally you do. A couple of screws will be included. A whole mess of installation parts are here, and these parts are not only going to give you those pieces that you need to install the lock, such as the several and many screws that are required, the mounting screws, the spanner wrench, which is a multi-purpose tool which we'll go over. They also included in here a T-strike. That's a 2 3/4 tall T-strike, even a dust box for that. There's not a dust box for the 4 7/8 strike. That's unfortunate. It would be nice to have one. You're going to have your inside thumb turn. You're going to have your inside key cylinder as well. Okay. And all of those parts, as you go through the installation aspect, are discovered as you need them. Now, there is a link below this video to the manual. It's a thick manual. The reason is because, why is it thick? Well, because it's in 3 languages. So it's 3 times the thickness that you would otherwise need. It incorporates the template. That's also in there. And it is the warranty card. And it gives you, admittedly, installation instructions for the entire L1000 series. So there's several models, there's different functions. This is everything. So, you know, yeah, it's a lot to go through, but the information that applies to you in this instance is substantially less. There is this document which is included. Okay, I have seen this. This document supersedes all prior versions. Resetting an unknown combination. The discussion on how to reset the combination, if you don't know it, is detailed here. I do have a separate video on how to reset this somewhere in the site. In order to reset an unknown combination, you walk up to the lock and you don't know the combination. There's a way to reset it, but you obviously have to have access to the inside of the door in order to remove the lock. The lock has to come off the door. There's no way to reset it from a locked side, and you don't have permission or access to the inside. You cannot recover a combination from the outside of a locked door. You have to have the lock off the door. That is a pretty substantial video. It is a very substantial endeavor because you have to really study how the combination chamber works and how the gears on the inside work. It does take a study. I'm not going to cover that in this video, but I do have, I would search combination chamber, Kaba. I do have a video where I go over exactly how to do that. It is lengthy because the process is not necessarily simple. Hopefully you never have to encounter that video, because if you do, it's going to require some study, so be mindful of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to move into the documents that are posted down below, cut sheet, product brochure, instructions, things of that nature, template, and let's begin with that. Now there are indeed several links down below that will allow us to take a look at different facets of the lock, the cut sheet, the instructions, the template, etc. Let's start with the document that's likely called cut sheet. I believe it's called cut sheet. Indeed called cut sheet, and it allows us to, in a very simple sense, even though it is possibly outdated by the time you see it, understand the options as they apply to this lock set. The how to order is the most straightforward way to really back into what options are available in this lock. And of course the entire Dorma Kaba line is built under the same structure of how to order so that you can put the parts together. So let's dissect the part number. It's an L series lock. In fact, it's an L1000 series. The next letter in the part number is the hand of the door. Ours is LR, and that's because we have a right-hand door. That would also be appropriate if you had a right-hand reverse as well. The only difference that you're making is you would flip the latch bolt over, but a right-hand door or a right-hand reverse door would take the same lock. Doesn't matter if it swings in or if it swings out. Your lever is still going to go to the side, and I'm obviously doing it backwards, but you would just flip the latch bolt over, would be the only differentiation. After that, you've got so that's the choose one option from each category below. The function option is next. We have a 4 in our part number, and that's going to be a cylindrical lock, combination entry, key override, and passage. And we're going to dissect that function moving next, actually. And then we have a 1, I believe, a 1041. Indeed, 1041. So the 1 in that part number is literally going to tell us that we have a 2 3/4 back set latch bolt with that floating faceplate. That little wobble, that's floating. You can order it specifically with a beveled faceplate. Don't see a reason to deviate from a floating faceplate unless you need the 3/4 inch latch throw. At that point, you would then go with the 5 function, the cylindrical 3/4 inch throw latch beveled faceplate. Would be how you would go. And then in that case, it's obviously incredibly crucial that you certainly order it with the correct hand. So 1/2 inch latch throw is going to be floating faceplate in the 2 3/4 or the 2 3/8. It's made in that lock, that back set as well. Back set's the edge of the door to the center of the hole. If it's a square edge door, it's the center of the thickness of the door to the center of the hole. If it's a beveled edge door, you don't really measure on either the high side or the low side. And if you're doing so, you need to compensate because that is actually the bevel is actually derived as follows. And I'll just make a quick sketch. If you have a square edge door, it's literally, if your door is square edge, you've got a 90 degree, it's right to the center of that 2 1/8 inch hole that's there. Actually, should obviously be drawn like that. Okay. Now, if you have a beveled edge door, and just drawing it with a from the center of the thickness, because that bevel is a defined value. It's 1/8 inch for every 2 inches in door thickness. So be mindful that if you're going to be drilling the hole to mark your back set correctly, and that's important with this lock because you have function holes. You've got additional holes that you have to drill, and you really need to be at the right center line. Otherwise, you put the lock on, and it might work okay, or it might be a little too tight, and you might operate the lock, and it might not work freely. So deriving the proper back set when you strike your vertical center line onto which you will locate your points to drill for your function holes needs to be accurate. You will be off. If you measure from the high side over to the center of the hole, you really are not measuring over far enough. And if you're on the small side, the push side of a bevel door, over to 2 3/4, you're really over too far. And those holes will be a little bit of a 1/16 this way and a 1/16 this way. And when you drill that 2 1/8 through, it's not gonna dead head into each other. So be mindful of that. 2 3/4, 2 3/8, beveled faceplates, 3 3/4 inch latch throw. So it's a very simple lock in that regard, that there's not a lot of options. If you want a Kaba mechanical combination lock with a lever, it's an LL or an LR, then your function, then your finish, basically. The 41 at the end, that just means the packaging that's required. To back up, after you get to the 1041, which is our part number, L1000R, because it's a right hand, 10 is the model, 4 is going to be our entry, our key override. If you are doing a key override model, either a 20, a 40, or a 70 series, you can do a LR1041. Pardon me, an LR1011 would be the number. That's just mechanical combination only, lever trim, no key in the lever. If you're going to toss a key into it, you need to specify the key override. This part number's got an S in it because that stands for Schlage. What are the other cylinders? Let's take a look. And there's then a follow-up document called Fact Sheet, and on page 2 of that document, and it's a great document because it gives you a simple overview of what, you know, some people might think is a complex, overwhelming lock. It's not. It's a beautiful lock. Removable cores. So these are going to be large. They can do small format or large format. Small format is going to have a letter B. That's going to be Best. Frank Best patented the small format core in about 1921. It is unchanged in design. I think it's unchanged in design in 100 years. Best, Arrow, Falcon, all of the clones of Best. If it's small format, we mean Best and their equivalents. I would say they're clones. And you would indicate B in the part number rather than S. Your large format, or in the case of Schlage, full size, it's large format. Medico, ASA, Yale, Abloy, 5 or 6 pin lengths. You will indicate that letter when you order it. It is actually back to the price list. It's actually on page 2 there. You will indicate M, and that will be the derivatives of Medico, ASA, Yale, Abloy will be compatible with that. The fact sheet also tells us Corbin Russwin. That is going to be a C in the part number. Corbin Russwin 6-pin length. Schlage, and then finally Sargent. Schlage is going to be an S, and Sargent's going to be an R, is the bottom line. Never are cores included. You will always have to order those separately as a separate standalone product. You will, of course, need to have whatever is necessary for a proper functioning removable core. Control keys, you'll need a control key, whatever the mechanism is for doing that, however the system is. Yale is a similar system to Schlage, how a blockage is removed with a longer key. So that's all listed there. You're going to either have a non-keyed model or a keyed model, and if it's a keyed model, it's interchangeable core, and you have to supply the core. There is not a key and lever native Kaba design is the bottom line. It's always interchangeable core. Finishes, we can talk about finishes as well. They're going to allow us to do polished chrome, which is 026. 03 is bright brass. 05 is antique brass. And then finally 26D. And our lock here, of course, is 26D. That's just good old satin chrome. Okay? Satin chrome. You will also get, with the lock, the installation manual, a template, and all of the hardware required. There is a note on the Medico ASA Yale Abloy. 5 and 6-pin Medico ASA Abloy cylinders require a special knob spacer included with the package. So be mindful that you're installing that. There needs to be apparently just a little piece of, probably plastic material. Going to see if it's included in the package. Do not see it included in the package, and that's probably because this is an S or a Schlage version. If we ordered the M Medico, I'm sure that they then incorporate that spacer into the kit. Now, I think the thing to do is to move on. Let's move on to the fact sheet. Let's take a closer look at that and see if there's anything that we need to discuss. Now, looking at the fact sheet, let's continue on with an overview. The hallmark of the mechanical combination lock has always been, I'd like to say reliability, but I don't believe, for me, I've owned them, I've used them thousands of times. I've never personally had a problem with reliability. I understand that locksmiths don't always feel the same way, that the combination chambers may not be up to the task of, the level of volume that's possible. I can tell you that there was a major department store, a Chicago major department store by the name of Marshall Fields, who was purchased by Macy's. Used these exclusively for back of house access for their employees, and they worked really well. No keys to lose, no batteries to change. Used hundreds of times a day, most likely. And that was the hallmark. As they state, mechanical push-button lock eliminates problems and costs associated with issuing, controlling, and collecting keys and cards, provides exterior access by combination while allowing free egress. It's a mechanical-based lock made certainly of ferrous-based components. So when they say exterior access, you'll certainly see these installed in exterior applications, but no special provisions that I'm aware of are made for an application where it's going to get rained on. So be mindful of that. There is no battery. Fully mechanical lock eliminates the material and labor expense of battery replacements. Number of codes, single access code, one easy to manage code for all users. That's the marketing way of saying there's only one code. You cannot have any concept of multiple codes, no audit trail. There's just one code. Possibly an advantage for your application. Programming, lock is easily programmed via the keypad without removing the lock from the door. That's true. You do have to have access to the inside of the lock, and we're going to go over how to do that. This is field non-reversible. It cannot be cannot be reversed in the field. It must be ordered the appropriate hand. You're ordering them lefts or rights. Lefts are going to be good for left hand or left hand reverse. Right hand locks will be for right hand or right hand reverse applications. The key override, which is optional, we spoke about that, small and large format options. I've never had anyone ask to run a cylinder through it that couldn't be accommodated. I can't think of any cylinder that isn't already accounted for. Yeah, I'm thinking, and I can't think of you got Sargent, Yale, Corbin, Russwin, Medico, and ASA variants, obviously Schlage, and then all small format. That covers the bases. Operation modes, and we're going to talk specifically about this 1041. Push button access, just kind of passage, no key. You can have a passage on select models where you can set it into a condition by which you're allowing access without using the lock entry code. So that would be advantageous when you need to allow access all day long. Just rotate. You really don't want the wear and tear on the lock combination, on the combination chamber, if it's unnecessary. Feature is activated from the inside with a thumb turn or key included with all passage models. You can also do a privacy model as well. Disables the lock from the inside so that the entry code cannot be used to gain access. So if you need to provide security on the inside of the room, you can set it so that it temporarily disables the activation of code from the outside. Access is permitted using the key override only when in that mode. You could, I suppose, think of that as a hotel function where only a key, in this case maybe a special key, will get you in. Economical, a cost-effective access control solution. Yeah, I do find that they're well placed in the market. They may not give you the sort of control that you want. No audit trail, no multiple codes, no true way to make it weatherproof. But for your application, it might just be perfect. You might want just one code. You might want a reliable and durable lock that will handle the rigors of what you're going to put it through, you may not want to have any batteries. It's not going to fail as a result of a battery failure. It is, construction-wise, mechanically a heavy-duty cylindrical lock housing with cast front housing, unified trim plate, and fixed ADA-compliant levers. That unified trim plate, of course, they're speaking about this cast housing, unified trim plate. It's all one piece, basically in its construction. The levers are most certainly mechanically attached. They are very robust and rigid. This castle feature is going to engage in the hub. You're not going to really be able to see it, but you can. You can see the preps down at right at the tip of my finger. That's going to go all the way around, so you get a really heavy-duty engagement of the lever to the stem of the lever itself, the retracting hub. 3-hour rated UL and ULC, so you can stick it onto 3-hour doors, A-label doors. Watch that latch projection. You're probably going to need a 3/4 inch latch in some of those cases. Be sure to order it correctly under duress of a fire door audit. It would very possibly be found, certainly be found as deficient. The inspector will be looking at the label and is it 1/2 inch minimum latch throw, 3/4 inch minimum latch throw, and be able to easily measure your latch throw. Vandal resistant solid metal push buttons. That's true. There's not much you can do to this. If you press it once, there's nothing else to press. Once you press it once, it's locked and the combination chamber no longer will work. Again, 2, 4, and 3. It's of course clutch style. That will serve to make it very vandal resistant as well. If the proper code is not engaged, the combination chamber does not allow the linkages to work to retract the latch. Again, non-reversible. The finishes we talked about. 2 3/8 or 2 3/4, 1/2 or 3/4 inch latch. Minimum style recommended, that's going to be 5 inch. That's obviously going to be based on the width of your lock body, which is 3 1/8. And if you have a 2 3/8 back set, 2 3/8 plus 3 1/8, so you're going to take, how far over will this sit? So you're going to take your 2 3/8 back set, then you're going to basically take half of that 3 1/8, so 1 9/16. From the edge of the door to the edge of the lock should be 3 15/16. So they're really going to want a minimum of 5 inch style to get that lock installed. Okay, or I should over here actually is what I should be doing. What else do we have? Minimum 5 inch latch. Weight, they say 8 1/4 pounds. With its box, it's going to be closer to 11. Comes with a standard strike and an ASA strike. The key override we talked about. It does fit into a 161 door preparation into wood or steel doors with additional preps. There's going to be those function holes, and you're going to need additional function holes regardless of the function. Even if it's just the basic passage, you'll need a couple of extra holes. 1 5/8 to 1 7/8 door thickness. It will work out of the box. You will be able to make it work on doors as thin as 1 3/8 up to 2 1/4. This is ADA compliant in terms of the shape of the lever. Its return back to the face of the door is what conspires to make it completely handicap compliant, as defined in A117, the Federal Americans with Disability Act code, law. Forgive me, it's not a code, it's a law. DoD compliant, again, 3-hour rated, 3-year warranty. And down below, they give a summary of the functions. The 10, the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, or the 7 function allows us to review that in detail, and that would be a good place for us to move to, talking about the different functions. Now, moving into the combination function discussion, the L10, forgive me, the L101, a very common part number in that regard, is going to be a 1011, 1011. That's going to be a combination entry, and then you will change the combination by accessing the inside of the lock. Because we're in that section of the catalog where it talks about, you know, the functions, interior combination change. So the LR1041S, just the passage function. Mechanical combination outside, and the only other functionality is you can change the cylinder, change the combination from the interior side. Other than that, other functionality would be in a different model altogether. And we're just going to perform the interior, the combination change. So when the lock is installed, you're going to have in your interior escutcheon this part called the control combination plug change assembly. The combination change plug assembly, forgive me. That's going to simply be threaded into this unit. And you will use the key to remove it. So this will be installed. You're going to have your plate on the inside of here. You're going to insert your key, and this is what's going to allow you to remove this. And you literally need to remove this, and it's just threaded. And eventually it's going to come out, and you'll put that aside. Now, on page 26 of the installation instructions is where the instructions need to be followed exactly. If they are, it's going to work superbly. I've changed the combination from the stock 2-4 and then 3 to 4-3-2. I've already changed it just for the sake of changing it. And I think what you might want to do is to read through the instructions once or twice and then give it a go. Really don't think you're going to break anything by just testing it. At least I never have. You might want to have a new combination already in your head so that you can rely on it. But after the control key, after you've inserted the control key into the combination change plug assembly and you've unthreaded it and removed it, what they want you to do in step 2, and this is going to go from page 26 to page 28. It spills over to page 28. Nothing on page 27 except the images, the figures they refer to. Step 2 is to turn the outside lever once to the stop position. That's the stop position. The latch should not retract, and indeed it does not. Okay. Enter the existing combination. That's all you do. I've changed it to 4-3-2. 4-3-2. Let's just make sure it works. Yeah, it indeed works. Okay. So step 2, turn the lever to the stop position. Release. Latch does not retract. Enter the existing combination. 4-3-2. Don't do anything else. On new installations, use the factory set combination, 2 and 4 together, and then 3. So if it's a new combination, literally push 2 and 4 at the same time with 2 fingers, and then the 3 in the middle. You should feel a slight click every time you hit the buttons, and indeed you will. You will feel a slight click. At this moment, insert the spanner wrench. All you've done is rotate it to stop, let it go. Enter your code, do nothing. Insert the spanner wrench. This is your spanner wrench. As shown in figure 4.3 to engage the combination change sleeve. Gently turn the spanner wrench clockwise to the stop position. A slight click should be felt. Then turn the spanner wrench counterclockwise to the stop position. This tip you're going to install right here. Turn it clockwise. There is a click. I felt a click. At that moment, release it. You've done nothing else except click it, put it back the way it was. Turn the outside lever once to the stop position and release. The latch should not retract. It does not. Choose your new combination. Well, I'm going to put it back to factory. 2, 4, and then 3. Enter your new combination. That's when you go to page 28. Turn the outside lever once all the way until it stops. Hold in position and make sure the latch is fully retracted. Latch is fully retracted. Release the lever. Step 8, turn the lever again to the stop position. At this point, the latch should not retract, and it indeed does not. Done it twice for the sake of doing it. Then you've got your new combination. Now, when I hit 2, 4, and 3, it should work. And indeed it does. My old code, 432, does not work. I hit it twice because that's clearing the combination. So now we've covered changing the combination on this lock. Follow the steps literally, and it will work every single time. It just needs to be followed literally. What would be really nice is if they put it on the inside of your plate. You know, if you've got access to the inside of the plate, you've got access to the lock. You might be able to fold that up and place it inside of here. I'm not saying you should, nor should you. But having access to the combination change would be something really nice that would make life easier. So now, that's the 1011, and that handles interior combination change for the functions that we're talking about. Moving to the L1020, L1021, incredibly common lock. LR1041, that's, for me, the most common Kaba mechanical lock that I would really ever sell. Now moving to the key override, the 1021, the only thing that we're adding is you have a combination entry, interior combination entry, interior combination change, and then we're adding key override. Okay, so the only thing from a 1011 to a 1021, let's say, is I'm adding this. This we've demonstrated. We've got the keys here. Okay, rotating that key is going to retract the latch. Okay, I've got my control key on this ring as well. Very simple and straightforward. Now the 1031, let's say, that's going to give us combination entry, interior combination change, and a passage function. So the 1041 lock that I have on my desk will serve as an example of how that works. The bottom line is this. What's the bottom line? Okay, the bottom line is this. On the inside, you're always going to have your combination plug assembly. The key won't be installed in the cylinder. It'll be just outside and separate. Okay, now with your lock, you're going to get your thumb turn or your key cylinder. So the way that this works is onto the inside of your trim, your regular cylinder is going to go here. Okay? That's going to allow you to change the combination. Down here, you can install either a thumb turn or a key cylinder that will allow you to control this little functionality here. Okay? That's going to turn it into a passage. Simply said, right now, you can see that that is vertical. Every time I rotate the lever without the combination, nothing's going to work. I enter the combination, it retracts the latch, it relocks, it's locked. You always need the combination. If my thumb turn or my key cylinder turns that clockwise 90 degrees, at this point, every single time I rotate that lever, I now have a passage. Very appropriate for those applications where you just want access all the time. Turn it back vertical. Now I'm locked. Now I'm back to requiring the code at all times. You can control that, and it will be held in with a C-clip on the back of your trim in the smaller hole. Okay. That C-clip's going to hold it in. Not the smaller hole, the lower hole. And you can control that with a key or just a thumb turn. You don't want someone to put it into passage mode without the key, then you will install the key version, and it will come with the lock either way that you proceed with it. That covers your 41 function. Combination entry, forgive me, that covers your 31 function. Combination entry, you can set it into passage, you can change the combination from the interior side. The 1041, which is what I have here, is the same lock. Passage function, interior combination change, mechanical access, push button access, but it adds the key override. Okay, that's all it does. We've already demonstrated that. Then our 1076 function gives us the ability to interior combination change, combination entry, key override, privacy lockout available on key override models only. Privacy lockout. So the small difference here is that when you study the 1076, you're going to see a push button on that inside trim. So that is going to obviously give you the ability to lock out that combination while someone's in it. Would be very appropriate for if you have gone into a coffee shop and you place your order and you're waiting for it to come up and you use the restroom to wash your hands, etc. There is a combination lock on the door. What they do in those instances is they add a separate occupancy indicator deadbolt so that now your exit is retracting a deadbolt because it has an occupancy indicator, vacant, occupied. That will, of course, disable the code from working, even though the lock will still work, but the door won't open because your deadbolt is thrown. A more elegant solution to that would be the LR1076, where you don't have an occupancy indicator, but when you push the combination, it won't work because the stall is obviously, the lavatory is obviously occupied. So I don't have that lock here to demonstrate, but that's what we would be looking at in terms of having that sort of functionality. Okay, very typical and straightforward. By the way, on the 2 3/8 latch bolt, the faceplate on that's going to be 1 inch wide, so be mindful of that if you're mortising your door. Now, moving to the... Okay, we are in the installation instructions now. Moving to... Let's jump into the mechanical parts price list. And it will be an outdated version by the time you're seeing it, very likely. But what's handy about the price list is it is the area by which you can look at your L1000 series lock or your 1000 series. L is the lever version, 1000 is the base knob model version. And you will be able to get to that page where the L1000 series is listed along with the exploded parts diagram, and you will be able to derive from that all of the replaceable, buildable maintenance parts that are available in the lock. And we very often sell replacement parts for these locks. First, the manufacturer offers the data. They publish it. If you need a replacement combination chamber, that's part number 1. Part number 1 is going to come back as, of course, part number 74366000001. You can buy the combination chamber. Those do fail and fatigue with time. I've had people tell me that they're no good and they break. I've never had one break. But locksmiths, people who make a living doing it, have told me that I think the intent was they don't really tolerate a lot of abuse, a lot of misuse, non-adult use. The exploded parts diagram is crucial because it will allow you to continue to get useful service out of the significant investment in the hardware. As we look at that document, we scroll through it, there's 8 pages of parts that are there. There's a lot of parts only because there's a lot of parts, but there's also a lot of parts because they list it in different finishes. So be mindful when you're looking at, you know, the Schlage outside lever assembly. That's part 57. You can literally purchase just the outside lever assembly. If somebody comes by and they smack that with a bat and they've cracked the lever in half, and everything else is okay, you can replace just this. And you're seeing that part listed not only by its hand, but by its finishes as well. Okay, by all the finishes, and that kind of, and that's what certainly helps make the document so very long. Okay, and part 57 kind of rolls over to, you know, different. You know, you've got, you know, it's listed. The part itself is listed 8 times. You got lefts and rights, and you've got 4 finishes. So when you invest in this lock, you will very likely want to not only keep access to the combination change, but you're going to want to keep access to the parts list. Because if something stops working, frankly, if you're somewhat mechanically inclined, or if you're a locksmith and you're servicing it for a client, that's going to be your go-to document, because you'll be able to determine what's not working on this lock. And I have spent lots of time with this lock, and I've spent lots of time with this lock over decades, where I would fully digest how it works, and I would recall that, and then as years go by, that information, that knowledge would evaporate off, and I'd start over, and then refamiliarize myself with the lock, and it's just really a great lock in the sense of being able to understand a beautiful piece of mechanical engineering. And that is most definitely what this lock is. It is a piece of beautiful mechanical engineering. Let's study it. More so, to just provide an appreciation of the lock, I'm going to remove these 6 screws on the back plate. I'm sure there's all kinds of warnings on here that say you void your warranty if you do. What's nice about this lock is nothing falls out, nothing comes falling out. Frankly, I think it's difficult, if not impossible, to put it back in a sense of it not working after you put it back together. The only thing that you can do, I think, is put the spindle back in the wrong orientation, and you'll quickly determine that the lock does not work. So those 6 screws are off, and you can just work this entire plate free. Lock is locked right now. You can see how beautiful it works. It has a clutch assembly on it, where when it's getting resistance from the combination chamber up here, if I'm going to enter the code, you can watch how it moves differently. Locked, unlocked. Okay, just a real beautiful, yet simple, but, you know, smart was the person who thought this up. The only thing I think you can do is put this in, this has to be vertical when it goes back together. Now, what's allowing the combination change to occur is when you rotate this slightly. You can only go that far. When you rotate it, you're basically pushing the top of the combination chamber change lever right here. That pushes it down. That's all it does. As I rotate this, nothing is happening. It's locked. You know, it has reseated itself. And putting it back together, make sure that that's vertical. That's the only thing I can come up with that I've had to take this off one time. Put it back together. Make sure that the plate seats properly. And you'll know when it does. And I can tell you now that it is, because it's seated very nice and flat. I'll put my screws back in. If you have to take this lock apart, you're obviously performing maintenance on it of some sort, where you have a substantial issue with the unit. Okay. I did have to take the cover off. I had my combination chamber switch a little bit backwards. And the only time I've ever really had to take it apart, and I've never, I don't recall changing any parts on this lock. I may have a wave washer. there's a wave type washer that's on the inside. The only time I've taken it apart was to get to the combination chamber to do an outright replacement, and that's fairly easy to remove. The only problem that I have with the lock is that it seems, you know, there's lithium grease on the inside, so you're going to want to have, you know, the ability to keep your hands clean as you are working on the lock. And anytime you service the lock and certainly change the combination, you're absolutely going to want to make sure that your combination works after every time. Okay. Now let's continue on with the review. As we move forward with this lock, we're moving into the template. And there is a link below this video to the template. And you know, we've got multiple languages here. And that's certainly going to be because, well, Kaba's a company that has a global footprint. That's number one. A substantial Canadian presence, a substantial North American presence. I think the headquarters are outside of Montreal. Don't quote me. Somewhere in Canada. The center of the installation booklet, as you pull all that out, what I would do is bend back these staples and then carefully pull the paperwork out. The first page, and again, we've got 3 languages here. The top one is in English, so that's what we're looking at. Now, what's nice about the template, and I'm going to put the book down and just look at it online, is I'm not concerned about handing. And what's nice about the lock is all the holes go straight through. So life is easy. You don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, I drilled the cylinder hole on the wrong side. Nope, everything goes right through the door. Even if you were to drill a hole that you didn't need, it's going to be covered. We are doing a passage function, as we talked earlier about the thumb turn down here. So our hole will go through for the combination plug assembly. Our passage functionality will go all the way through. Our 2 1/8 inch hole will go all the way through. Then you're going to have two more holes that go all the way through, and it's these two. This hole and this hole, I believe. Yeah, I did that right. There's 2 inner holes. Okay, so, and those 2 holes are what is going to take the 2 longer screws that are going to go through the back plate in through for the lock. They might not be these screws. Let's take a look. Well, we'll get to that in the installation instructions. We're talking about the template right now. So, when we look at the template, all of those holes literally go, literally go straight through the door. Your back set, we discussed that. It's probably 2 3/4, but double check. You may have a 2 3/8 back set. You'll generate that vertical line so that you can get your top hole, your thumb turn hole for a passage if you have that, your 2 through bolt holes. So you're either going to have 4 or 5 holes, but you'll always have 4 or 5. You'll never have less than 4 nor more than 5. The vertical center line is the top of the door to the center of your, what we would call a 161 prep. A 2 1/8 inch hole at 2 3/4 back, whatever height. When you are measuring on the frame for the location of the strike, if you put your tape measure to the underside of the header and come down, you'll take your top of door to the center line of the lock location and add 1/8 of an inch, which would account for the gap between the top of the door and the the underside of the header and the top of the door. And that's how you'll account for that. Very simple and straightforward. The template only shows the 2 3/4 T-strike. If you have an application where you're using the 4 7/8 strike, it's a hollow metal frame. You're not prepping that. They're assuming. You could have a wood door and a wood frame, and you could need to chisel for that 4 7/8 strike. If you do, then fine. Just be mindful how to adjust that center line. They don't draw attention to it. And the reason that they don't is because, you know, the assumption is made that you can relocate the center line. So if you've got an existing frame location, 43 11/16 underside of the header to the center line of the 4 7/8 strike, 43 11/16, we know that it's got to be 43 9/16 top of door to the center line. Now, there is some interesting information regarding how to apply the template and drill from outside of the door, but compensate for any bevel, if there is any. Then we have lock will accommodate 1 3/8 to 2 1/4 thick. You will see on the right or left side of the 2 1/8 inch hole, if you were to take the template and literally, as they indicate, this flap folds over the edge of the door, you will then be able to locate the center of the thickness of the door so that you know where to position the 1 inch diameter hole for your latch bolt. You'll drill a 1 inch hole right in the edge. I always like to use just the regular cheap 1 inch fly bit, spade bit it's been called. Outside wing cutters, Bosch makes a nice one that will score the hole, easy to evacuate. I would always drill my 2 1/8 inch hole first, then my 1 inch edge bore, lay out my function holes already, that's already laid out. Continue on with that process. I would always drill from both sides of the door and meet in the center because that allows me to confirm that I am in the proper location. If I'm missing and I'm off, I know I need to stop and make an adjustment. The good news about this lock is you have to be really off in order for this lock not to cover it. The truth of the matter is that's not the proper way to do it. It will be measured correctly, drilled properly, etc. You don't want to have to be there with a file making your holes oval shaped to accommodate that you drilled 2 3/4, but you're doing 2 3/8 or vice versa. So check your hardware. And we're going to get into the installation instructions in a moment. And the point of the matter is all good installation instructions has a bill of materials. What you're supposed to get, you'll always check that before proceeding, as will we, when we go to identify the material. Looking at the rest of the template, I don't see any other concerns at all that need to have attention drawn to it. There is a document on changing the code combination. We have done that at length, but that document is there for your review, as it is in the installation instructions, page 26, page 28, I believe. Then there is the document that I hope you never have to see because it will require an investment recovering a code when you don't know it, and you have to literally get your hands on the combination chamber. It's really not difficult, but it does require some critical thinking. And at the end of the day, there's only one way for it to work. And if you discover that one way that it works, you're in good shape. And again, I do have a video somewhere recovering that combination chamber. Now, to the installation instructions is where we're going to pick up. We're going to go through it relatively quickly. We're going to take a look at page page 4 and 5, what they're showing us here, and I'm going to split my screen. Because I want to be able to see the stuff together. Front, we're going to go through the parts. Front lock assembly is part A. Part B is your latch bolt. We've discovered that. Part C, D, and E, reinforcing plate. This hemmed over edge is going to stick out away from the door. You can't really put it down this way onto the door. This is obviously has to be towards the bottom. Your part C, reinforcing plate. You're going to have part D, which is your inside trim plate. You're going to have your interior lever, part E. Your accessory screw package. Let's take a closer look at everything here. Now, as we go through this, strike box and strike, we do have our ASA strike included. It's not listed there. I can't tell you why they automatically included it. That might just be a change. It might be how it comes at all times. 2 combination screws for that. That's going to work on a steel or wood frame. It's got machine threads up at the top with a flat undercut head. It's a flat head screw with an undercut, and that is intended to go, or I should say to be installed when you have a thin gauge material. A true undercut flathead, a true flathead screw would not sit flush in this because this is too thin for how tall the head of a screw is. So that's why it's undercut. Those threads on the end are wood thread, and trust me, they'll work in either a wood frame or a steel frame. So we've covered our strike. Combination plug change assembly. Part C. Its 2 keys, or D. Those are DF59 keys. DF59. Those can be bought separately. DF59 key has come. They've sold it separately. I think the way you get the keys is when you buy the spanner wrench. So I think you get all of this together when you purchase it. The spanner wrench will just jump to part I. That's your spanner wrench. Now, you need that to change your combination. You can use a screwdriver too, I suppose. This is a spanner wrench. This feature is what allows you to tighten your inside collar. The trim plate, the reinforcing plate, the trim plate goes on. You've got your whole stem sticking out. You're going to bring that down and you're going to tighten it. Well, you can see that hole that's there. You're going to put your spanner wrench in the hole, and that's how you're going to continue to tighten it, and conversely, loosen it. And that's how that works. So be mindful of that. That's part E, your thread ring, they call it. Part F is an extra spacer. That's going to certainly be if you've got a little thinner door. Oh, pardon me, a thicker door would be my guess. They're going to give you some rubber bumpers. That's nice. They're just silencers that you're going to use. You need 4 832 by 3/4 machine screws, 4 3/16 and 4 11/16 screws for the drive unit. I don't think you need any of these at all for installation. I don't think you need any of them, but we'll go over that in a moment. So we've gone through the fact that all of those screws in various lengths are in here. There's also a roll pin in here. Let's see if they identify the roll pin. They don't. Oh, it's part H. Forgive me. 1 extra cross pin. I don't recall what the cross pin is for. We'll get to it in the installation instructions. Then, of course, you're going to have your spring clip, your part P spring clip, and then your passage set assemblies. You want to have key control over who's coming in and out. You've got it. You want to have just thumb turn control over who's turning into a passage. You've got that as well. Tools required. You're going to need an electric drill, an awl or a center punch. I like a center punch a lot. That's when you are laying your template out on your door. You've marked everything. You can then just take your center punch and either give it a tap, or you'll have a spring-loaded center punch. You want to leave a mark that you will be able to easily find your door. I do kind of like a pencil, because if I decide I didn't want to make a little dent in the door, just erase it. If I'm incredibly familiar with the hardware and it's rote over and over, I'll use a center punch because that does act as a way to seat your drill bit. I will use a pencil when I am unsure, and then I will measure twice. I will measure twice, and then at that time, once I'm positive that I have my locations, I will then center punch everything so that my drill bit will seat itself properly. I don't want that drill bit to walk a little bit before it pierces into the material at all. 1-inch hole saw with a pilot drill. I would use that 1-inch spade bit, fly bit is what I would use. I like that better. A 1-inch hole saw is going to pack itself with the wood as you're moving through that you're going to have to then extract out of the hole saw. Fly bits are easy. They make a mess, but they evacuate the wood quickly and very inexpensively and exactly how you need it. A 2 1/8 hole saw. Now, I like a hole saw when drilling into the face of the door, and that's because I've got my arbor and my hole saw. As soon as my drill hits the door, I know immediately if I'm flush to the face of the door. I know immediately. Because my hole saw will make perfect contact on the circumference of the bit all at one time. I can tell immediately if I'm not drilling straight. And that hole saw keeps me honest. That hole saw is inexpensive. A bimetal hole saw will drill lots and lots of holes. Dozens of holes. Maybe hundreds. After you get through the veneer, you're usually just dealing with particle board. If you're drilling lumber core, stave lumber core, or structural lumber, it's a different animal. You're just ripping through, 30-pound particle board that's fairly, loose. And they're awfully inexpensive. You do have to pop out the core that's stuck inside of there. I go so far into the door so that my arbor bit will breach. I will make sure that that matches up with where I am, make any adjustments necessary, and I'm off to the... You know what, I don't breach all the way through. I will breach all the way through if I'm doing a... maybe if I'm doing a door viewer, is what I'll do. Smaller drill bit, things of that nature. Or if I'm drilling in a drill press sort of orientation, I'll breach through. But by hand, I'll only go so far. Because as those two holes are drilled from either side, I can clean up the interior of the hole if I'm off. A 1-inch wood chisel, I would say that you probably want an 1 1/8 wood chisel. If you want to go so far as to have a 2 1/4 and an 1 1/8 for your 2 1/4 height, and your 1 1/8 width, if you chisel a lot of doors with the 1 1/8, the 1 1/8 is well worth the investment. I would always use a router, is how I would do it. A Porter cable template that I would thread on, I would mark my center line, and I would use my half-horse router bit and make very quick work of it. And then I would have a spring-loaded corner chisel. Knock the corners out real quick, and I'm done. Clean it out if necessary. A hammer, obviously, a Phillips head screwdriver. Small, flat blade screwdriver. Not sure what we're going to use that for. Pliers for passage set locks only. I would say that you might want some pliers to help get that spring clip on. You might need some help to get that spring clip on. Moving through, we've covered all of the parts and the tools that you need. Let's move through a little bit further. As we move through the installation instructions, marking the door, this is going to be a review of the template. And you can read through that. We've covered, I believe, everything necessary about the template itself. It would be repeating to go over it again. Again, keep in mind that you're going to have either 4 or 6 holes. The template literally calls that out. Is it 6?
What's wrong?
Five. Let's take a look. Where did 6? Maybe we do need to review it. Okay. Forgive me, I understand where that hole's coming in. You're going to have, per the template, you're going to always have this hole. That's 1. 2, 3 you'll always have. You'll always have this one. That's 4. You're going to have 5 or 6 holes. You'll have the 4 for the base, or 5 if you have the passage function, but it's the hole in the edge of the door. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's your holes. That's where you're going to be in terms of that. The installation instructions, scrolling through to page 10, the prior pages were about marking the door. The L1000 series lock set has been pre-assembled at the factory to accommodate inch and 5/8 to inch and 7/8 doors. For inch and 3/8 to inch and a half, adjust the lock as follows. Remove the backplate assembly, which we've done, which is not on the unit. By removing the 6 backplate screws, one of the screws may be under the serial number sticker, which it was, right here, which we've pulled off. Or here, forgive me, serial number sticker. Okay. Now what they require that we do is to utilize the spacer that's going to come into play. And in order to do so, we are going to remove the backplate. Again, those 6 screws are going to come out, so I'm going to pause this video and remove those screws. Now what we do at this point is pull the backplate off. We're going to set all this aside. You just want to put it down carefully, I would suggest. You're going to remove the part CC, the cylindrical drive unit, removing the 4 Phillips head screws, Phillips head SEMS. Maybe just SMS, sheet metal screws perhaps. Anyway, we're going to remove those. And this is where our shorter screws that I was unsure of where they're going to come into play are going to come into play, certainly. Or actually, they should be longer screws. And you notice we've got one here. Remove and discard the spacer, BB, located between the backplate, AA, and the cylindrical drive unit. Using the 4 shorter screws now. Yeah, okay. So 4 shorter screws. I see how we're doing this. We would then, if we're doing a thinner door, I thought we were doing a thicker door for a second, we're going to simply now use the shorter screws that are indeed included in our hardware package, those really short, tiny ones. Those 4 tiny little screws. Okay? They're going to go in here after you put the, after you remount the unit, and that's going to allow you to bring that unit in closer rather than having that spacer. Okay. Now use the shorter screws. Okay. So I'm not going to actually screw that back together. We see the concept of how that's going to go. Talk about removing the cross pin from position B on the drive shaft and moving it to position C on the drive shaft. So that pin's going to have to come out and get moved over for the thinner door, is the bottom line. Let's take a look and confirm in the drawing what position C is. You can see that in figure 4-1. We're doing a thinner door, so that roll pin's going to get moved, or the drive pin is going to get moved closer to the lock, and that would be moving it in to C, as you can see there. Now, reinstall the unit. Reinstall the assembled unit, the back plane down to the back of the lock, and you're in good shape. I haven't done that because we're just going to go over the adjusting it for the 2-inch to 2 1/4. Remove the back plate, remove the 6 screws, remove the drive unit, removing the 4 screws. Skipping to page, we were on page 10, now we're looking at page 12. Insert the extra spacer and then use the longer screws. So now we're going to have 2 of them stacked, and we'll use the longer screws. Okay? And that will get us out to a thicker door. Obviously, at this point, it's going to next tell us to move that drive pin from position B to position A. Move it all the way out. Not going to go through the effort of pulling that out. It's, you know, you'll use a plier to drive that out. And that would be why they're giving you an extra one. Those little units seem to hit the floor and then keep rolling. So there is an extra drive pin in there, and that's certainly what this is for. I'm going to reassemble this at this time. And then we're going to continue on with the installation instructions as we move forward. There's not too much left. Pause this video while I do it. You've got that reassembled, and be mindful, there's two ways to put that on. You can put it on the way that it's all going to line up, or you can put it on the wrong way and it won't line up. So be mindful before you start putting two of those screws in. You'll get two in, you won't get the other two in. Moving down to installing the lock, page 12, step 1, section 5, step 1. If not already removed, remove the inside lever by depressing the spring-loaded retaining clip. So what they're referring to here is that little tab that's right at the tip of my finger. If I were to insert something quite small into it, like the provided tool, I can depress that. That clip is going to be held in the inside grooved area to hold the lever on. In order to get the lever off, should you need to, the sucker goes on and it snaps back up nice. Okay. To get that off, you're going to need the spanner wrench multi-purpose tool combination change. Push it in and you're going to depress the tab, and then you can at the same time pull the lever off. So that's how that works. Align the pull the lever off while simultaneously releasing the retaining clip. Push it and kind of pull. Remove the lever from the lock body. Align the latch tailpiece A the latch tailpiece A is what we're looking for. Okay, so all they're really talking about is the latch bolt needs to be installed into the door, and what they're saying here is you're going to make sure that all of this lines up correctly, just like that. You've got these two little wings here and here. They need to fit inside of the retracting hub. Well, they need, forgive me, they need to fit in the hub itself, not the retractor. It all needs to go together like that. It keeps it in place at this point. Okay? Needs to go together just like that. So the latch bolt is going to be the first item that goes into the door. Align the latch tailpiece. That's your tailpiece. All this mechanism here that moves these pieces. With the cylindrical drive unit, by depressing the latch bolt slightly, you push it a little bit in order to get the lock to the retractor and the outside hub and the retractor itself to communicate with the latch tailpiece. Make sure the latch prongs and the cylindrical drive unit engage each other as shown in figure 5.1. Didn't scroll that far. Yeah, 5.1, a very detailed. The latch assembly itself is the gray outline silhouette that's there, here, here, and here. Okay. Moving to page 14, you're obviously going to start to test your combination at that point. Let's take a look. In section 6, they talk about simply making sure the lock works at this point. Enter your default code. Make sure you can retract the latch bolt. If you don't get free movement, correct operation, you've got to go back to the workbench and sort that out. Section 7 is installing the reinforcing plate. Place the reinforcing plate A in figure 7.1. That's going to go over your pre-drilled holes. Insert the two 2.5-inch screws. I was correct about those really long screws. There. That'll go through your plate all the way through the lock. And into your mounting holes. Okay? Those are excessively long. which is okay because they are going to become quite consumed by the cavity inside of the lock itself. Okay, they're just going to end up inside of the lock housing, and they won't really, they don't really go through that far because you're already consuming, you know, if this is 2.5, 1 3/4 of it is already consumed by the door thickness, a little bit by the plate, so it's really not going to go in farther than about 5/8 of an inch perhaps. Tighten the screws to secure the lock housing to the door. I generally would leave them a little loose. I want to adjust that lock on the door before I make my final tightening down. Using the thread ring, and that's why I leave it loose, the thread ring, you're now going to bring, you've got your reinforcing plate on, now bring the threaded ring down. You'll be able to get that tightened by hand. And then I would probably, well, I'd look at the installation instructions. That's also going to allow you to margin your plate as well. Okay. Let's take a look here. Right, okay, right. Forgive me. Like this. You'll have access, obviously, from the outside. Your reinforcing plate, your trim plate goes down. Your trim ring is going to come down, and you'll thread that on. Before you tighten everything, just be sure it all works. Installing the reinforcing plate. Step 3, moving to page 16. We've exhausted everything in terms of your base units. Your 2 long screws, your reinforcing plate goes down. Your 2 long screws thread to the inside into the lock chassis itself. These need to be tight. Make sure that everything works. Your finish plate's going to come on. Then your threaded ring will come down, and you'll tighten that. At that point, your installation is basically finished. However, if you have a model that's going to require the thumb turn, the passage function, thumb turn, or key, as we have, you need to then first, of course, install that down to your trim plate. That's going to be section 8, page 16. Insert the key or turn knob passage set assembly A into the lower section and hold it on with the spring clip as we discussed earlier. You're very likely going to have to trim that tailpiece a bit. They say that it can easily be broken. I would use a couple of pliers, or I would very carefully cut it with a hacksaw, controlling the piece. Hold the tailpiece firmly with a pair of pliers on the passage plug side of the tailpiece, adjacent to the desired brake line. With a second pair of pliers, grip the tailpiece on the other side of the scored line and bend it up and down until it breaks. Figure 8.2, that's showing how to illustrate that. You know, they've got, 2 1/4, 2 inch, 1 3/4, 1 5/8, maybe 1 1/2, 1 3/8 is how they were doing that. Let's take a closer look. I don't really see where they give us a guide as to what to trim it down to, but the fact of the matter is, you're certainly going to need to trim it because it will only go so far. The thickness of your plate is about 1/4 inch. So I would expect that you're going to knock a couple of notches off of that for your 1 3/4 thick door, no doubt. If we're using up 1/4 inch, we're going to try to get to 1 3/4. This is sticking off the chassis of the back plane, 3/4 inch. You're going to want it to go in 1/2 of an inch for sure. So you'll knock a couple of notches off of that. You want to lay that out and measure it before you go trimming it anyway. But because it's used for doors up to 2 1/4, you'll certainly have to trim it down. Section 10, they go into talking about installing the inside lever. That's simply using your tool to depress that spring-loaded tab. here while simultaneously pushing the lever down and then kind of pulling your tool out of place, and you'll notice that it will seat itself quite well. Installing the inside lever moves us to installing the combination plug assembly. Well, that's pretty easy. The key just acts as a handle to thread that in. You'll just get that threaded in until it stops. You won't want to lose these keys because you'll need to get that out when you want to change a combination. And people do buy those DF59 keys because they do get lost. It's literally a handle, clockwise, counterclockwise. So how to change the combination, those keys, your spanner wrench, you're going to want to hang on to all of that stuff. No retainer clip is used on that. Turn the key clockwise to tighten. And don't over tighten. There's no reason to do that. It's not holding anything on, really. You just want it snug. Moving down to page 20 tells you about the warranty. And we have for sure gotten to the middle of the section. I would recommend that you complete that warranty and send it into the factory should you have any warranty claim. They're going to definitely pull records of that stuff. I have found. They're going to want a paper trail if there's a warranty claim. Installing the strike relates back to the templating. We won't get into that. We talked about the templating and the correct positioning of the dead latch tab as shown on page 23. Installing the key override cylinder, that's going to be quite specific as to the model of lock that you are using. If you have a situation where the cylinder does not seat itself, you probably need to make sure that the drive cam or the tailpiece that's on the inside of the lock is indeed properly oriented. And I'm going to put these screws back on and then demonstrate that, because the back of the cylinder needs to mate to the tailpiece or the drive assembly for the unit itself. Must be aligned. Okay, sure. So last screw. This is the Schlage. Our control key will pull that out. That drive mechanism in there, that's got that angled preparation, that needs to be in the right orientation to accept this. If that's moved around, it will need to be, you can use that flat screwdriver they mentioned earlier in order to rotate that so that you can get the cylinder completely in and then seated in place. You might have to adjust that. I've had to do that in the past. Certainly not a big deal. And they talk about that in step 4. Now, let's discuss that a little bit more thoroughly, because we certainly see something here that does get our attention. You'll notice, and you may have noticed earlier as well, I put that key in and I rotate it 180 degrees to get retraction. I go the other way and I get nothing. Okay. I'm not so sure that's the way this should work. I'm going to remove the core, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to rotate it in the opposite direction. See if I can get it back in that way. It doesn't like that. Take a closer look. So the bottom line is, studying the only way that drive assembly can be positioned, it will not position itself any other way other than the orientation it's in, because the pin, the spring-loaded threaded cap retainer pin that's on here, needs to go into that available space that's there. Right at the tip of the tool. It needs to fit inside of there, and it won't go any other way. So the good news is this key will always retract the latch when you are going towards the hinge. Okay, that's how you'll know it works. It does not work any other way. You'll also want to thoroughly test this, because The spindle on the inside, you can actually unintentionally set it so that every time you rotate the lever, it pulls the latch back. So you'll want to test, and the spindle works as a lazy operation as well. There is a plus sign on the inside of the lock, and those outside quadrants are hollowed out that will allow it to rotate. But if you have it timed incorrectly, every time you turn the lever, rotate the lever, it will pull the latch. You need to be able to rotate it so that it moves freely 90 degree, and if this is out of time, you'll be retracting the latch every single time. So if something isn't working, you've got to check the timing of it. The way that I pulled this lock out of the box required no adjustment of timing whatsoever. So, but be mindful of those steps that you might have to engage in. And obviously test the combination every single time. Moving to page 26, this is where we talked about changing the combination. The video started there. We're going to scroll on through to page 30. Moving into the end of the functionality, because this is a 1041, page 30, when using the passage function, the following procedure must be followed, otherwise damage will ensue. Enter the existing combination. 2, 4, and 3. All we've done is enter it. Turn the outside lever to the stop position and hold, keeping the outside lever turned in its turned position. Rotate the passage turn knob or keyed lock to the right clockwise to the horizontal position. I still have it turned. Release. Now we're always activated. Okay. To cancel, rotate the passage knob or keyed lock to the left counterclockwise to the vertical position. The passage function is now deactivated. Will not retract the latch. Change the combination only when the passage function is deactivated. Make sure that you are in the locked mode when that's all happening. As we continue to scroll through, preserving the latch. Section 17, preserving the latch. Preserving the latch really talks about having it mechanically installed, dimensionally correct. And it's so important that they're saying that the center line of the strike plate, the position of the latch, everything is lined up correctly. And if the latch bolt is falling too far into the strike, they want you to literally use those rubber bumpers to pad it out so that that is not the case and not what is happening. What happens, apparently, is what they're concerned with is in the event that the dead latch falls into the space, you're going to really tear up the lock. Very common that this is going to fall inside and then you're scraping it against everything. As I'm pushing on the dead latch, it takes a lot of pressure to push that in. So have a proper alignment is really the moral of the story when it comes to alignment. Step 18, reset an unknown combination. That's where I've mentioned that there is secondary video that talks about that, and they say that there is no procedure for determining an unknown combination from the front of the lock. A lost combination must be cleared by removing the combination chamber from the lock housing, and then a new combination can be set, not for the faint of heart. Although, literally called the manufacturer to verify some data before I proceeded. Incredibly helpful. Absolutely thoroughly helpful in that regard. They're going to talk now about how to remove that combination chamber. I'm going to skip all that. That would be a 1-hour video in its own, and it is, in fact. And that concludes the installation instructions. It's a fantastic lock. People spec it. It's been around for decades. People love the lock. Doesn't have market dominance as perhaps once upon a time it did, but you can't escape the fact that a mechanical, non-battery operated lock that is certainly, in my opinion and many others, incredibly robust. If you have a fleet of these installed in your area, you might want to have a couple of combination chambers, because I do see that we sell those at the ready, and you probably want to review that documentation if you expect to have to quickly change a combination chamber. So be mindful of that as well. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Kaba Ilco products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. Any questions on the LR1041S in a 2060 or any other Kaba Ilco Kaba Access product, and it's not Kaba Ilco, Kaba Access product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.